Does anybody else have a dog like this? If you're carrying anything in your hand, they think it's a treat for them. Huh? This is Maggie. Come on, Maggie. She likes to make sure she escorts me everywhere outside. She sat in front of the greenhouse the whole time. Huh, Maggie? The neighbor's dog came over to visit her, and she sat in front of the greenhouse to make sure he didn't bother me at all. Chased him off a couple of times. You're a good dog, huh, Maggie? She's looking for the neighbor dog, huh? You want a treat? All right, let's go get a treat. Hi everyone, welcome to Be Good Farm. Today I'm going to be talking about when do you plant your plants. You've got so many options, so many seeds to have to keep track of. And when you're like, when do I start indoors? Do I direct seed? When do I even do all of this? Well, I'm going to tell you the process that I go through if I do it the old school way, which is pen and paper. So if you're wanting to plan this out that way, this is what you're going to have to know. So the first thing you're going to start off with is your first and last frost dates. Now, if you don't know that, you could just go to www.almanac.com, scroll down a little bit, and it should have a first and last frost date calculator for your area code. Just put in your zip code and it'll pop it up. It'll tell you your first, your last frost date, and then your first frost date. So your last frost date is at the end of winter, coming into spring. That's your last frost date. Your first frost date is after the summer, after the warm season. Then the first frost in that winter year is going to be your first frost. So now in between, so for me, I have April 15th as my last frost date and October 19th for my first frost date. So the days in between, that's 186 days. Now, to make everything easier, now that we have that information, to make everything easier, what we're going to do is we're going to convert days into weeks. Just trust me. It's going to be so much easier for your planning. Another thing to note that you might want to keep handy is Googling what your temperatures are, the average temperatures every month for your zip code. Some vegetables and flowers are temperature sensitive, and so like for example, lettuce won't grow in the hot months. So right here I've Googled it and I have my sheet and it has all the different months of the year. It says what the average temperatures are, the highs and the lows, and then it also tells me how many days that it rains. So that might be helpful to you. So lettuce doesn't really like it over 75 degrees. And here it's April, is the average high is about 73. May is about 80, which is when I can start pushing it. June is about 87, and that's when my lettuce quits. So that may be something you want to keep in mind as you're planning when to grow everything and when your successions are going to be. You may not want to grow lettuce except maybe under some shade. So that might be something. If you're having trouble growing something at a specific time, check out your average highs and lows and Google that particular variety and just see if there's a certain temperature that it does not thrive at. That might solve some of your problems that you're having. Okay, so keep that handy. So as you're planning it all out, that would help you out. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to grab a calendar. So this is for 2024. This is a year calendar. It tells us all the days that we have for each month. Okay, so now that you have your last frost date, what I want you to do is go like this. See, look, here's April 15th. I've circled that. That is my last frost date. Down here, October 19th, this is my first frost date. So we know that all of these is our growing window. This is generally when all of the annuals, like our garden, is going to thrive. Tomatoes won't grow anywhere outside of that window. They'll just die. So now that we have that, what we're going to do, and what I want you to do, is first all of the weeks in the year, I want you to label it 1 all the way through 52, making sure that we now are not going off of the months and the particular days of the calendar, and we're just going off of the weeks of the calendar. That's going to help out a ton, just breaking it down into 52 instead of 365. So now after that, what you're going to do is you're going to have 2 columns, one with your weeks. Now when you're planting your weeks, I have a full week here, half a week here. Make sure you're not adding a week if you've already counted it here. See, you don't want to double count. Okay. Now in green, I've put 0. So this is the first week that I can transplant out or start direct sowing my tender annuals. Okay, this is 0. And I want you to write backwards 1, 2, and then here 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way to 12. Most of the plants that you're going to plant aren't going to go past sowing 12 weeks ahead of your last frost. Okay, so when we are deciding when to actually plant our plants, this is going to be a huge lifesaver, and we don't have to do a whole lot of math or thinking. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is take all of our seeds, and if you look at the back of the package, so here is one of my broccoli seeds. Okay, not all packages are created equal. Not all of them are going to give you the information you need, and you'll have to start Googling after that. But I've got some sheets that might help you if your package doesn't give you the information. You're going to look at the back of the package, and usually it'll tell you when to start these seeds. And for this one, it says 6 to 8 weeks that you start these indoors. Okay, so 6 to 8 weeks. If we're trying to decide how many weeks we're going to start indoors, or what the actual date is, if we have our 0, we're just going to look back at the green number that we wrote, and here's week 8. Okay, we're going to start those on February 18th or 19th. Anytime within that week would be a good time to start those seeds. Okay, so what we're going to do is that is the weeks to start indoors. Now I have separated out for myself. Okay, these ones are ones that I would start 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time. I'm just going to go through a list real quick. These are vegetables. So broccoli, tomato, also your kind of cherry tomatoes, your Roma tomatoes, or your paste tomatoes, tomatillos, cabbages, more cabbages, cauliflower. So I sorted them out. This is my 6 to 8 week pile. Okay, and this one is my 8 to 10 week pile. This is so green onions, regular onions, peppers, and kale. Now these ones are our 4 week before the last frost to start indoors. I have some marigolds. These ones from the dollar store are awesome to put in the garden. I love them because they're kind of short. They don't really compete with all the other ones, and they do have a scent that kind of deters some pests. And when I plant this next to my tomatoes, I don't get as many hornworms. It's not going to guarantee you don't get any, but it is a good plant to put out in the garden, and butterflies and animals love it. Pests or insects and things like that. And then this is a hollyhock. If you've never grown hollyhocks, oh my goodness, you've got to. They're amazing. They're a perennial. They'll come back year after year. They're just the best. Okay, and then I also have lettuce, fennel. I'm not growing it again, but you can start fennel, and then Brussels sprouts and different kinds of cauliflower if they take a little bit longer to grow or less time to grow. Now, this is the list of ones that I would be direct seeding. Okay, so I have some sunflowers, cucumbers, some squash, some butternut squash, watermelon, cantaloupe, carrots, more watermelon, pie pumpkins, also field pumpkins, your yellow neck squash, and zucchini. All of those are the ones I like to direct sow. So now that we've got that organized, all of our seeds are into the categories of how many weeks we start ahead of the last frost. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find for each variety the days to maturity. Okay, so for this one, my broccoli, this one right on the package, it says 59 days. So that's how many days it will take in order to get something edible from that plant. Now, the thing to keep in mind, there's a difference between the days to maturity for vegetables and for flowers. Vegetables, when they say days to maturity, they mean the day that it gets into the ground, not from when you started it indoors. It's the day you transplanted or the day that you direct sowed. With flowers, days to maturity means the day you sowed it. The day you transplant it doesn't really affect it as much. So there's a difference there. Now that we know the days to maturity for each variety, we're going to convert the days to maturity to the weeks to maturity. And in the description below, I have a little conversion chart that's going to help you out. Transferring everything into weeks is going to make this whole process so much easier. Okay, so what might be helpful is having a little chart like this. I'll link this in the description below. I just made this really quick in Excel. Not every packet is going to give you all the information you need. I'll also link this in the description below. This will give you average maturity dates and yields per acre, which none of us are really growing any of this in acres, so that doesn't really matter to us. But it's a really helpful tool. It also has recommended temperatures, and then also the storage weeks, how long it will keep in storage for you. So this is a really great reference to keep on hand if your seed packet doesn't really give you the information. Now, so we have here is a yellow pear tomato. My husband really likes these. I don't like them as much. They tend to split because we get quite a bit of rain for us. As long as you pick them before the rain comes, they won't split, and they are very delicious. My kids really like these. They don't really make it in the house. So for a yellow pear tomato, I have here, it says 75 days to maturity. Now on our conversion chart, 75 days would mean 11 weeks to maturity. So I'm just going to write that down. So DTM stands for days to maturity. So I'm writing down it's 75 days to maturity, and the conversion is 11 weeks to maturity. And it also tells me to start indoors 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. To keep it simple, I'm just going to use the first week that it tells me. Okay, so 6 weeks, start indoors 6 weeks before last frost. So we're going to do some simple math here. Okay, so if we are going to start this variety 6 weeks before the last frost, we're going to go here. Here's the first day that we can put it out without danger. You can instead bump this date down 2 weeks just to be sure, because sometimes strange frost or a really cold night will come in. So you can either use the one that's recommended or 2 weeks after, just to be safe and secure, and you don't lose all those plants that you took so much time to grow. So we're just going to keep with this one for now. So if our last frost date is April 15th and we've counted backwards 6 weeks, we know that we want to start our seeds the first week in March. Okay, and that week is the 10th week of the year. So we're going to start that on week 10. Okay, because it's going to be in the greenhouse for 6 weeks, we're going to add 6 weeks to 10. That makes 16 weeks. Okay, we are not going to direct sow. TP equals transplant. DS is direct sow. So we know that we will start our seeds indoors on week 10. We will transplant them out 6 weeks later. And so this is our harvest window. When can we expect to have a harvest from this plant? That's when you take your weeks to maturity into account. So if we are transplanting it out on week 16, then we will add 11 weeks to that one, which would make it week 17 is when we can expect, 27. Week 27 and the first week of July is the first that we can expect a tomato. Now, this tomato, this is an indeterminate tomato, which means it will grow an indeterminate amount of size and an indeterminate amount of time. So as long as this is disease-free and well-watered, it will grow until the end of the season. And so I will just go till end of season. They last a long time. I would not succession plant anything like this. Now, we also have a tomato like this. Okay, this one is a determinate tomato, which means it will only grow a determined size and a determined amount of, it will have a determined harvest window, which is about 3 to 4 weeks, which when I'm doing my paste tomatoes for my sauces, I don't have the space to just have tomatoes coming in over and over and over again. So I plant determinate tomatoes and I just get a big canning session in just within 3 to 4 weeks in the summer, and then I'm done with my tomato canning. So this one is see, look, this one doesn't have a days to maturity. That is so annoying, but generally they are 75 days. We will reference this one here. So it says tomatoes is anywhere from 65 to 100, but 75 days is the standard, which is also 11 weeks to maturity. We will also start this one out 6 weeks before last frost. So we will start it indoors on week 10, and we will transplant them out week 16, and we're not going to direct sow. We can expect a harvest window from the week 27 to about 4 weeks. So I'm going to add 4 weeks to about week 31, which is the beginning of July till the end of July. That's when you will have an expected harvest for the paste tomatoes. So if you wanted, you could add a succession for these paste tomatoes. I'm going to put determinate tomatoes here. Okay, so if we wanted another succession, now it depends on whether or not we are going to be putting it into the same spot, tearing out those plants, and then replanting. You may not have time to do that. But if you want another flush, like say 4 weeks later, we would say, okay, in another 4 weeks, we're starting the first set in week 10. So I'm going to start my next one 4 weeks after that in week 14. Okay, we would add 6 weeks to this. So I would transplant it out in week 20 and add 11 weeks on top of that, since that's our weeks to maturity. And that would be 31 weeks to about 35 weeks. So we would then have more tomatoes in August. And that's how succession planting works. Now, if we wanted to tear it out and put the plants in the same exact spot, we would need to make sure that we had enough time from when we tore out the plants at the end of week 31. Okay, so this is week 31. We would need to transplant out in week 32. So we could do the math backwards here. So if we wanted to transplant out in week 32, because we have the other ones coming out in week 31, let's make sure we would have enough of a window, because I know my first frost comes in week 43. So we'll make sure that we have enough time. So if I'm transplanting out week 32, I would not direct sow. It would take another 11 weeks after that. So that's 43 till another 4 weeks. That's 47. So my last frost date in weeks would be, let's see, right here, week 42. I would not have enough time to do another succession in that same spot and have enough time to get any plants off of that. So I would scratch that out. And if I wanted a second succession, I would have to save room in my garden for a succession next to it and not in the place of that one. And then you would go through and you would do the same thing for all of your other plants. So let's do one more. This is our bush bean. Let's plant out for bush beans. Now, bush beans and pole beans have different days to maturity and different harvest windows. So you would have to Google that or look it up on the back of the package. So what I would be growing, this is for a Blue Lake bush bean, which are my favorite ones. The days to maturity for that is 60 days, which converts to 9 weeks. Now I direct sow these, so I would not be starting indoors, or this information does not matter. And so I would direct sow them in week, the soonest I could direct sow them is week 16. If you wanted, you could give them a couple week buffer in order to make sure that we don't freeze those little seedlings if we have an extra frost. I would start that direct sowing that in week 18. It takes 9 weeks to grow to maturity, so I would add 9 weeks to that. So I would expect some bush beans in week 27, and it's about a 3-week window harvest. So I would have bush beans from week 27 to 30. Now, I do have time for a second succession, and so I would take out these plants in week 31 and direct sow more plants in week 31. I would add 9 weeks to that, which would be week 40, and then 3 weeks for a harvest window to week 43. And that would still work for me because I can grow up until week 43 without any trouble or any frost damage to that. Now, this is kind of a gamble, but I think it's worth it. I've gotten quite a bit of beans with this second succession. Okay, so now let's talk about carrots. These ones can stand a little bit of frost, and so if I'm doing carrots, you do not start those indoors. That is a direct sow. Generally, carrots are about 70 days, which is 10 weeks to maturity. Do not start them indoors. Do not transplant them. And I would start sowing them in week 16. You can even sow them in week 14 and not have a problem. And that would mean if I'm adding 10 weeks to 16, then I could expect some carrots in week 26 through about 30. I give it about 4 weeks for my harvest window. And then I like to do a succession of carrots, so I have them all summer long. They do well for me throughout the whole season. And so I would plant every 4 weeks or so just to make it easy on me. You can do more successions, but for a home gardener, you don't really need anything more than 4 weeks, I think. So I will direct sow again 4 weeks later, which is I direct sowed on the week 16. So I'll direct sow on week 20, and then I should have a harvest in week 30 through 34, and then I'll do another succession in another 4 weeks. So I would succession sow on week 24 and have a harvest on week 34 through 38, and still have plenty of time within my growing window. Carrots can handle a little bit of frost. Their tops might die down, but you can even keep them in the soil, and it'll protect it a little bit. I would just cook with those, not eat them raw. Okay, so let's figure out a colder season vegetable. These are things that like colder weather. They don't like the hot months. Things would be cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, broccoli, things like that. So what you would want to do is take a look. Each one of these has different days to maturity. I really like this Copenhagen market. It's a really nice cabbage, a little bit smaller, really great for the home gardener. This one is a really, really quick one for cabbage. This is 65 days. Typical would be a 90-day. This one is a red acre, which I also really, really like. It does really well in my garden. Typically, they're about 90 days. This one's 85. Some are even 120 days. So when you're looking at your vegetables, you can have quite a bit of a range of your days to maturity. So we're going to go ahead and figure out our Copenhagen market cabbage. Now my video cut out on me, so I've already have this down here. This is a 65 days to maturity, which is a 9 weeks to maturity. But we will start it indoors 6 weeks before the last frost, which means we're going to start indoors on week 10, transplant out week 16, and expect a harvest from week 25 to 29, which is right on the money for when I actually start harvesting my cabbage is beginning end of June. Perfect. This calendar and this calculations work really well. So that would be a little bit different for the red acre. So if you wanted a succession of cabbages without having to plant a whole bunch like all at different times, you could pick different cabbages, one that's a 65 day, one that's a 90 day, and one that's a 120 day, and extend the season for harvesting your cabbage. You could do it that way too. That would be a great way to do it. Now for your zinnias, if you wanted to do some kind of flowers in your garden or for flower gardening, you would do it a little bit differently. Now remember, your weeks to maturity for your vegetables is the weeks to maturity after your transplant. Flowers is your weeks to maturity from the week that you actually start your seeds. So zinnias, they are a 90-day days to maturity, which is a 13 weeks. I would start them 6 weeks before last frost, which means I would start them on week 10, transplant them out on week 16, and expect a harvest from weeks 23 to 27. So that would be early June to the 1st of July. Now, if I wanted a succession of that, I would just keep a space for my first succession, and next to it, I would have my next planting and my next planting. We wouldn't have enough time in the season to pull those out and put more in. So we would, if you wanted another succession, you could plan on starting them 4 weeks after the original time that you started indoors, which is a 14-week. Transplant them out on week 20, which means you would have a harvest window from week 30 to 34, and you could do that again. So instead of starting them indoors on the week 14, you would start them indoors on week 28. You can also direct sow them. So one way that you could calculate your harvest, if you've got something that doesn't like the summer months but likes the cooler weather, you could start at the end of the season and calculate backwards from that. So say I have my Copenhagen market and I want cabbage in the beginning of the season and also the end of the season. The end of my season is week 43 and 42. Okay, that's cabbage can handle a little bit of frost. It'll be just fine. So the last week I could expect a harvest is week 43. So if my harvest window is week 40 to 43, I would count backwards from that. So that would mean I would take, this one takes 9 weeks. I would subtract 9 weeks from week 40, which is 31, week 31 to put my transplant out. Okay, which means I would have to start 6 weeks before that, which is week 25 if I'm starting that indoors. Now cabbage, you can also direct sow it. So If you don't have the room indoors or your greenhouse is just too hot to start seeds in there, then you can just direct sow on week 30 and expect a harvest then. So that's how you calculate your seed starting dates. So I hope this video helped you guys figure out how to do the math on your own. It seems like a lot of work, but once you kind of figure out the math and you've converted your days to maturity and your weeks to maturity and have all of your calendar by week instead of by days, it's going to go so much faster for you. Now, having a little piece of paper like this is a great starting point, but it can get a little messy when you're starting seeds and you kind of skip a line. You're like, oh, I should have started that one a lot sooner. Easiest way to keep track of it and make sure you get everything in all in the right time is grab yourself a calendar just from the dollar store or print it out online just for free. This one, I have 2 calendars, one for my vegetable garden and one for my flower garden, just because there's not enough space to write down all the different varieties that I'm actually going to be growing this year. So here's January for my vegetables. You can see I've got nothing because it's too early for vegetables, even the cold season ones. But you can see my first week of February, I'm getting pretty busy. So my sweet potato slips indoors. And then I have on the second week of February, this will be planting my kale, my cabbage, more kale. Week after that, some lettuce and some thyme. And then after that, cauliflower, broccoli. And then my lettuce. In March, I'll be starting lettuce, my tomatoes, my peppers. See, I don't have enough space for all these, so I have to go on. Yeah, as long as you get it all done in the same week, you'll be fine. Now, to make it easy, I have my crop plan. I have my bed layout, so I know how many I want to plant of each. So my lettuce, I'll be starting 54 heads. And then my Chadwick cherry, I need 4 plants of that. And my determinate ones, I need 38 of each of those varieties that I'm going to be growing, and so on. So this will make your life so much easier when you're in the thick of it and you just got to get all your seeds planted. This is how you get all the information onto your calendar and making it really easy for yourself. And I end up just hanging this in my greenhouse, so when I come out here, I know, okay, this is what I need to start this week. All the thinking is done and I don't have to worry about this. And the great thing about having a calendar like this and something like this is you don't have to do the math more than once. You can rely on this calendar year after year after year, and you just pull out the calendar and say, okay, what did I do the second week in February? It's already done, and you can reference, and you can even write little notes in your calendar how many you actually started, and you can write down maybe on this day you saw germination on your tomatoes. Keep track of what you're planting, how things are going for you, and every year it's just going to get easier and easier and easier to plan. I hope this helped. Now, if you want to do this the really, really easy way and you don't want to do all the math, I'm going to make another video about how to do it online and have all this math calculated for you. If you're doing a lot of varieties, this is the way to go. Go to www.seedtime.us and it's going to be really, really helpful. That's the next video. Anyways, if you found this helpful, go ahead and comment some of the things you might have learned. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments. You know, I do that sometimes. Write down maybe a method that's worked well for you and share it with the rest of us. I hope you guys have a good day. We'll see you later.